Diverse Founders Perspective, the podcast, Episode 3.
Welcome to Diverse Founders Perspective, the show where we tap into the lived wisdom of innovators, creators, and leaders who are changing the way we think about entrepreneurship, community, and
Mm.
identity. This isn't about business, it's about vision, values, and voice. Today, we are exploring the world of inclusive design, cognitive diversity, and cultural access with someone who's been working quietly and brilliantly behind the scenes to reimagine how we build spaces where everyone truly belongs. So, whether you are sipping coffee, kombucha, or herbal tea that helps you focus, get ready because the conversation is one of those that lingers long after it's over. So, the journey of belonging, work. Welcome to the show, Naomi. I'm so
Thank
excited
you.
to have you here. Let's start with your journey. What drew you to this work? Was there any specific moment that shaped your path into exploring identity, belonging, and neurodiversity?
It was. So many years ago, I started working in education, specifically with what was then classified as the mad, the bad, and the sad. I don't think you're allowed to call it that anymore.
No?
And one of the things that really struck me then, and it continues to be uh, fascinating to me, was how a lot of the children that I was teaching then, who were, for the most part, permanently excluded from mainstream education, were
Mm.
brilliant lyricists, that they were using rap, which I interpreted as poetry, to talk about their own feelings of marginalization and discrimination. And as someone that had read literature at university, I was very enamored by the skill with which these children were able to articulate a perspective which was so contrary to the mainstream conceptualization of the lives of these children and their perspective. And so I really, my first major struggle as a teacher was how do I mark or credit their skill in a system which isn't looking for the kind of talents that they were bringing to the classroom. And so I started a small publishing company in London, which was about publishing the voices of neurodivergent people. And through this, I was simultaneously writing and doing a lot of public speaking, which was about how do we reconceptualize neurodiversity as a voice or a genre rather than a medical diagnosis. And I was talking a lot about things like authorship and authority and voice, and as well something called intersubjectivity. So how the relationship between these children enabled them to empower each other in a system that disempowered them.
Yeah, oh, that sounds interesting. So, can we talk a bit about your background since you've mentioned you did all of this work in London?
Mm-hmm.
Can we tap into that and so that we get a clear picture of who's Naomi?
Okay, so I was at the time studying literature, and I was really interested in really literature as a space in which we explore our own lives and our identities. And as well, I was a poet from the age of about 9. I started writing my own poetry books. So I had already not cultivated any masterpieces, but I had for a long time explored poetry as my own vehicle for metabolizing my interests in identity and self-expression, and later really for reflecting on my own values and how my own values were could be used to guide me and my direction in my work.
Oh, interesting. So your career path spans publishing, education, and research. How did your
Yeah.
work with underrepresented voices, especially dyslexic writers, evolve into a broader mission around inclusion and accessibility?
So, having found myself in this position as a teacher, really just because I wanted to do some work with literature. I'd read it, and I found this job teaching English, and met all these students who were sort of, in my mind, brilliant but unable to succeed within the system. I started to do training to enable me to be a better teacher.
Hmm.
And in the course of this, found myself in classrooms where the students that I was teaching were being conceptualized as basically flawed and failed and incapable and really lacking the capacity to lead any fulfilling life or be gainfully employed. And I sat there feeling really sad
Yeah.
and angry, because I felt that if all the teachers were being trained that this cohort were essentially failed and flawed and incapable, how would they ever go into the classroom and equip those students with self-belief or positive self-knowledge, or the feeling that they had a value not just in the classroom but in their lives beyond the classroom? And this led me to undertake my PhD. And my PhD, I did a university in London, the University of London, at Goldsmiths. And as part of my research, I joined creative and writing communities that enabled me to access the sort of the then quite newly emerging communities of individuals who are identifying as dyslexic and neurodivergent, and really using these underground pub theatre spaces and workshops to explore how writing and creative work in general could be used as a means to speak back to the powers that they felt had positioned them as failed and flawed and worthless, really.
Yeah. Wow. So you've talked also a lot about cognitive diversity. What do you think most people most misunderstood about it?
Well, I think that cognitive diversity is one part of it, and another part of it is an identity. And so there is sometimes a misunderstanding that anyone who is neurodivergent fully understands what that means,
Hmm.
and that they know the solutions to their own problems, and that they know how to go about getting it, and that their experience is fully known to them.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, when I was working, especially in publishing, one of the things that I realized was that a lot of the people that I was giving feedback to were processing trauma, that the cultural biases and the stigmatization that they had been subjected to had created trauma responses.
Yeah.
So it meant that in my work as an editor, when I was trying to give them feedback, they reacted very strongly. And simultaneously, when I was working as either in the networking or at conferences trying to promote the business, the people who I was discussing this concept with were very defensive, or they felt that they had a very clear understanding of what a neurodivergent or dyslexic publisher is or was. Whereas my experience was it was quite exploratory. It was very creative. I certainly didn't know what I was doing. I was sort of making up as I went along. And the authors that I talked to when I sort of dug down into their processes and their perceptions had a very uh, murky understanding of their metacognition, that actually through the process of writing that they were sharpening not only their own self-knowledge but their own understanding of their practice, and this knowledge that they had around how they could make themselves the best possible writers and the best possible advocates of their own writing was markedly different to the conceptualizations that's often felt, especially within the marketplace, where it's, oh, these are people who we sort of need to pity and help out and support because they are ultimately the disenfranchised amongst us. Whereas a lot of the artists and the writers that I was talking to were actually at the same time as being aware of their own metacognition, the way that they think, and very thorough in their reflexive practices and developing skills, that the skills that they were teaching themselves were very self-directed. And it wasn't something that they were able to go to their workplace and say, oh, I would like to learn these skills. I would like to learn these skills. I'm working on this at the moment, because there was a sense that if they did that, they would be stigmatized and discriminated against. So we now call this masking, and it's sort of more known now. But there is still, I think, a lack of understanding of just how important metacognition is to the success of many individuals who are thriving in their workplace, whether that's in the cultural sector or as writers.
Oh, interesting. So what's one thing that you still think like people still struggle with in creating inclusive spaces?
Well, there is an idea that an inclusive space has a particular aesthetic or a particular set of criteria, and that is something which is expensive and difficult, that you're going to have to get in all these extra tools to make that happen. But actually, the idea of what inclusion is something which is both structural and internal. And so, yes, there is a lot of work that needs to happen in terms of being able to identify structural barriers and to being able to collect the data which will enable decision makers to make better choices about how they employ and recruit neurodivergent people and support them in the workplace. But the biggest barrier many neurodivergent people experiences is the prejudice that other people hold in their assumptions about their value and their worth. So, inclusion does mean big structural systemic change, but inclusion also means an awareness of our own prejudice and the defensive reactions that we have when somebody explains to us the way in which their perceptions differ from the norm, and how that has a subsequent impact on the way in which they conceptualize the world and translate that into their ideas or the way in which that they act or to projects and collaborations and teamwork.
So has there been any moment where your own identity or way of thinking felt like it didn't quite fit? Or how did you navigate that?
I think that we are, all of us, experiencing moments of what I like to think of as first of other. You
Yeah.
know, especially anyone who has traveled, anyone who is, suffering from imposter syndrome in one way or another. Uh, we all have moments where we feel that we don't belong, or that other people understand the environment better than us.
Hmm.
And it's I always think of it, it's a bit like when you go to a foreign country, to a foreign restaurant, and someone says to you, "Oh, what do you want to eat?" And you're like, well, I have no idea. I have no idea what I want to eat. I've never been to this country. I've never eaten in this restaurant. Like, tell me what I want,
Yeah.
right? And and I think that we are sometimes embarrassed to say things like that. We're
Hmm.
sometimes embarrassed to say, like, tell me what we want, for fear of sounding stupid, or that we can't make our own decisions, or that we are dependent. And this fear of dependency, I think, is very valid.
Yeah.
I think that there has been a lot of work being done to enable autonomy and agency within the field of neurodiversity.
Hmm.
And I'm personally um, a little reserved around the concept of advocacy, even though I think it's very important because of the way in which it's asking other people to change. Whereas I think that there are many ways which we can change ourselves, not to fit a system, but to make it possible for other people to understand that the collaboration and teamwork and sharing resources is a part of a bigger process towards creating environments which enable us all to say, hey, I don't know this space. What is it like? How can we work together in this new space?
I think all this sounds very fascinating. I wish more people could be willing to talk about this, but now I can see we don't have so much time left, Naomi, even though like we could talk about this for days. So let's
Mm.
just go through things just a bit quicker. Making inclusion practical, not formative. You work with organizations, event organizers, and educators to move beyond checklists. What does it actually look like for you to build inclusive space that work in real life, not just in paper?
Well, I think that there's much of the sort of Nordic design principles which are
Mm,
really useful. For example, like the minimizing sensory overload is very key to Nordic aesthetic, but also very important to universal design for learning framework. Just generally reducing sensory overload and reducing cognitive overload. So what that might look like is, a crowded PowerPoint or a crowded wall display. So I sometimes think that it is the bathrooms of buildings which are the biggest giveaways. If you go in there and there's all these instructions telling you how to use this space, the space is not well designed.
yeah.
Your biggest clue to knowing whether a space is well designed is if you don't need instructions
And
on
tell me
what to
more
do.
about the European Accessibility Act. Do
Oh,
most people
the
know? Yeah.
European Accessibility Act is linked to more to do with products and procedures, and the way in which those products and procedures have to, by June the 28th of this year, change. And it depends a lot on where you are in the European Union, and it also depends a lot on your company size. So you can't, there's no blanket thing here that to be aware of, except for if you are an individual business, being careful of using CEO optimization and the basic criteria of the WCAG. And then if you are a bigger businesses, just checking that your products and processes are accessible for all, and that's quite a comprehensive.
So why
uh,
does the arts must be for everyone? Why the
I
arts
beg your pardon?
why the arts must be for everyone?
Ads, adverts.
Yeah, art, art, like arts, like
Oh,
yeah.
it sort of works on assumption that at some point in all our lives, one or other of us, our family or our friends, is going to be struggling to participate either physically or cognitively, whether that's opening a jam jar or using a tin opener or being able to buy something on our computer from one of the online shops. That at some point or another, everyone is going to be affected. And the idea behind this massive systemic change and rule is to enable as many people as possible to use online services and electronic products.
So we are wrapping it up. So maybe I have two more questions for you. So I have a rapid fire question right now for you. Who's someone doing incredible work right now in inclusion that more people should know about? Who do you think?
Well, my current academic hero is Nancy Doyle, who is her work is brilliant and definitely should be looked up.
Oh, brilliant. So final thought here, so we can wrap it up. So what's one piece of advice you would give to another neurodivergent or underrepresented professional working in culture and education?
Well, I tend not to give advice to anyone, since I don't see myself as someone who has enough knowledge to do that. What I do think is really important for everybody to do is to write and reflect and to identify the things that they are feeling.
Thanks for watching the Diverse Founders Network podcast. Next episode is about empowering and innovation with Sarath Vajapalli, the co-founder at Qturn and Pocket and supply chain enthusiast.